Mr. Leitch, thank you very much for your time. I just want to read one headline that actually was quoting a CEO of the IATA, and he says, if airlines are not given aid, they will go bankrupt. Do you agree?
That's 100%. That's Mr. Alexander de Juniac. He's head of the International Airline Transport Association, and he is 100% correct, because what we need to understand is that the airlines have actually had their incomes reduced to almost zero. There have been one or two repatriation flights and a couple of cargo flights, but those cargo flights are flying without anything in the cabins. They're just flying with cargo in the belly. So the airlines have got these massive overheads and running costs from the leases on aircraft, from all their staff complements, and the massive infrastructure that they need to support that, and yet basically no income. And what we also need to bear in mind is that the airline industry is going to be one of the last to recover from COVID-19. Now, the expected recovery date has been pushed out more and more for the whole world, which means it's been pushed out even further for the airline industry. No one's expecting much in the way of a recovery before the end of this year, Q4 this year, which means the airlines are going to have to be able to survive for the next 9 months without really any significant income. None of the privately owned airlines can do that. So they're going to have to go to the governments for bailouts, which will be interesting, because many governments might then want to exercise some form of control over the airlines and insist on a equity shareholding, buying into the airline for their bailouts. So I think the landscape's going to change very much in the next year.
And I'm going to talk to you about that issue around an equity partner, for example, that has been spoken about at length with regards to SAA. But I want to ask you the question around whether or not you foresee the kind of help that the president of the IATA is speaking about coming anytime soon in our case. And, of course, case in point is SA Express and the South African Airways. Pravin Gordhan has already made it clear that the airlines right now are not the priority.
And indeed he's correct, because government really does have far more pressing needs in terms of people going hungry in the street, as we saw just in the news bulletin. And airlines have always been something of a luxury industry. But at the same time, airlines are absolutely essential for the ongoing functioning of the economy. And once the economy starts beginning to recover from the COVID-19 lockdown, it's going to need a massive airlift capability in terms of the airline's ability to transport high-value goods and people. The tourism industry in our country has absolutely come to a dead standstill as well. So they can't ignore the airline industry. The question of specifically what happens to SAA is far more difficult, because government has been literally, on the one hand, saying, sorry, we cannot afford to give it any money. But on the other hand, it's been buckling to the political pressures and the unions, saying, well, OK, don't worry, we won't have any retrenchments and we will start another airline and so on. And at this stage, those two desires are irreconcilable. We're going to hear again today, hopefully a bit later, from yet more meetings between the unions and Minister Gordhan, if they can find a way forward on this. But the balance of power shifts continuously between the economic forces and the unions. So I think that there's an expectation or a hope that government may be able to restart a much smaller airline, perhaps a new sort of phoenix, a new airline rising from the ashes of the old one, rather like happened with Varig and Swissair many years ago.
Yeah, and the story around an equity partner, Guy Leitch, for SAA, that's been a long-running headline for as long as I can remember. Do you foresee any of that happening, given the amount of debt that airline currently has? And if so, where could it possibly come from? I'm just remembering now that at some point we had the head of Virgin expressing some interest around buying up a stake at SAA, but that was some time ago.
Yes, and to be honest with you, it was more a publicity stunt than a serious offer. If Richard Branson was to seriously want to buy a share in SAA, he would insist that it be debt-free. In other words, government have taken responsibility for all the legacy debt, and that he have a significant share in it and be able to operate the airline without political interference. So I'm afraid the reality is that there is nobody, at least I can't imagine anyone, in the entire world wanting to get involved in SAA at this stage when they're fighting absolutely daily for the survival of their own airlines. So you can put the notion of an equity partner coming in as a white knight to bail out SAA off the table. There was an attempt, a very worthwhile attempt, 5 years ago by Mr. Nico Bezuidenhout, current CEO of Mango, to form a joint venture partnership with Emirates. That was unfortunately killed by Dudu Myeni. And since then, there's been no likely candidate to come in as a joint venture partner. So the government would have to take over the 30 to 50 billion rands worth of debt and leave an airline as a fresh, clean sheet of paper without debt going forward. And that is a very tall order for government as well.
Final question to you, Guy. The question around jobs. At SAA right now, you have some 4,700, and the business rescue partners don't seem to be shifting in as far as that issue is concerned. SA Express, the provisional liquidation is in place. What happens with all these jobs? Is it a foregone conclusion that they are going to be lost?
My suspicion is that SA Express is not important enough to want to save, so we will lose the 700 or 800 or so jobs involved in that. And it is very sad indeed. SAA, there's a good chance, of, because of the dynamic that I discussed, of a smaller, much more streamlined airline emerging out of that. That might save perhaps 1,000 jobs. But bear in mind, too, that if SAA as an airline, which employs 4,700 people, as you mentioned, closes, then it will bring down SAA Technical as well, which won't have enough aircraft to service, Air Chefs, another important subsidiary, and probably SAA Cargo as well. So the loss of jobs would be in the order of 8,000 or 9,000, which is absolutely huge. And it needs to be borne in mind that IATA has calculated that every airline job supports another 24 jobs in the broader economy. So the knock-on effects are absolutely enormous as well.
Guy Leitch, as always, thank you very much for your time. Your insights always treasured here. SA Flyer magazine editor.